Inspiration, clarity, confidence, and wholehearted business strategy. Welcome to Your Next Chapter, the podcast especially for women in their 40s and beyond who know that business and personal development go hand in hand. Tune in each week for marketing, mindset, and personal growth strategies, along with inspiring stories from women around the world who are creating new businesses and lives that are personally fulfilling and financially rewarding. If you're looking to create a business and life you love, you're in great company. Let's find out what will unfold in your next chapter. I'm your host, Angela Rasmus, and I'm so delighted that you're here. Hello there, this is Angela, and welcome to episode 32 of the Your Next Chapter podcast. Now, if you're a regular listener to this show, I really appreciate you and thanks so much, but you've probably noticed that I haven't been releasing episodes quite as often as lately. And the reason for that is because there's been a couple of challenges in my family world at the moment. You know, your business and your personal life are so entwined, especially when you're a solo entrepreneur. But one of the beauties of being that is the fact that you get to choose your schedule. And when life throws curveballs at you, you can respond. Now, I do have this high sense of responsibility to my audience. I've got into this habit of putting out a podcast every week and having these amazing wholehearted conversations that I love to share. And so when I was faced with the idea of, look, it's a bit tough to do that at the moment, you need to pull back a bit. I got to tell you, it was a little bit tricky for me because there was that feeling of letting people down, that feeling of not doing what I said I would, that feeling of pressure that all comes from within. But what I'd like to share with you is the concept of self-imposed deadlines. And these are things that can trip us up so darn often in our own businesses. The reality is that when you have your own next chapter business, you get to design it exactly how you want to. And the second reality is that you get to change it exactly how you want to, when you need to. And it was that philosophy that I decided to take on board. Because the other idea that you're letting everyone down and you're doing the wrong thing and you really should not take it easier at the moment, that was not going to be good for my own self-belief, my own self-worth. Two of the things that I talk about and believe in so much that we need to build and keep constant in our next chapters. So I've actually been quite congruent with my values, with the concepts of self-compassion, when I decided just to pull back for a month or so and release these podcasts fortnightly just for a wee while. But I do want to reassure you that they will be back to monthly, probably by September, when I've just moved through this period that we're in at the moment. And so thank you so much for your patience, and thank you also for everyone that has emailed and that has left reviews on iTunes. You're sitting here in your wee home office pounding these out on Audacity and the other tools that I use, and it just feels fantastic when you do get that feedback. It's a lovely exclamation mark at the end of the week. And so to this episode, this is actually a little bit of a throwback. This is a recording of a call that I ran with two beautiful colleagues about 6 or 7 weeks ago now. So we're in early August, so yeah, this was back in June. Now the call was an open call which we had people register for, called It's Our Time. And the headline to that was A Call for Conscious Entrepreneurial Women. Now this was a call where we, the three of us, and that's Carolyn, Tate, and Samantha, Nolan-Smith, and myself, two great friends, were talking about this feeling that a lot of women have been having lately who are in the entrepreneurial world. And we'd had these conversations with each other, and we decided to open that wider and actually share these perspectives with more women. And we put a call out asking, are you feeling like this? It's where you've got this feeling that you're a bit disillusioned by the way the business world is today, and you're feeling disconnected from yourself and from the community and even from nature. Just this feeling of push, 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 and the concepts of capitalism and the patriarchal way that society has been put together in a lot of business and employment areas. And just this feeling of it's a bit icky, and do I really have to work this way? So this call was all about opening up to feminine energy, and with its core of creativity and collaboration and abundance and love, that could actually sit at the heart of our businesses, that we can choose to do business in a different way. And yeah, part of this inspiration came from a quote from the gorgeous Dalai Lama, who said, "The world will be saved by the Western woman." So that was at the heart of this conversation. We wanted to talk about how the old paradigms were breaking down and the new paradigms were emerging, and the different ways in which women are stepping up and opening to this new way of doing business, and how you have so much impact and so much power for being able to change these paradigms and do business in a whole new way. This was a really wholehearted conversation, very deep. We go into so many different areas that you might find really spark something, or I hope you find really spark something inside of you. Now, these sort of conversations don't always completely align with your opinions, and that's fine. Take what works for you, take what resonates, and let go of the rest. These conversations are designed to open you to new ideas, so you can try them on for size, see which ones do work for you, and then perhaps have that conversation with another woman and another one, so we can all be part of that ripple effect of this different way of showing up and doing business in the world. I really caught my breath. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I hope that there's things in here that for you hit really deeply and give you the chance to pause and to question, do I have to do things that way? Why can't I just follow my intuition and go in this direction instead? Well, the answer is you most certainly can, my darling. All three of us on the call have got our own perspectives, and you undoubtedly have them as well. So I'm really looking forward to sharing this particular episode with you. Bit of a twist, as I said. And then we shall resume our normal episodes again in a fortnight. And I'll be back in your inbox pretty soon on a weekly basis again. Let's see what unfolds in your next chapter with this particular story. So thanks again for your support, and I hope you enjoy it, and I'll talk to you again really soon.
To introduce you to the wonderful women who have joined me on this conversation this evening. Now, in the first instance, I want to talk to you about Carolyn Tate, who is a gorgeous colleague and great friend who I've been friends with for, oh my goodness, must be close to 8 or 9 years now. Now, Carolyn and I have regular conversations as wholehearted women, and this is the essence of where this particular call has come from. We were having one of those conversations just at our desk on our mobile phones and getting really quite passionate about the subject of women in business, of women in leadership, of the old paradigms of capitalism and the patriarchy that we really got a bit annoyed about at times and wanted to change. As the conversation became more passionate, and I was by then having to stay on the phone whilst I drove to school to pick up my son, we reached the conclusion that we wanted to bring more people, more women into this discussion. And that's where this call came from. Now, a couple of days after we agreed on the date and the time and the very rough idea of the structure, I suddenly realized there was someone else who needed to join the call as well, and that's Samantha Nolan-Smith, who speaks very passionately about bringing feminine energy back into our businesses and being in alignment. So that's how the three of us came on this call tonight. Now, you may have already visited the page, of course, and found out a little bit more about the background of these lovely women, but I just want to bring you up to speed with a bit of those bios so you can understand the passion behind the women who are joining this call. So back in 2010, Carolyn was a burnt-out marketer. She'd had a 20-year career at Westpac and Merrill Lynch in her own business, and she'd had enough. So just like that, she gave it all up. And I remember having this conversation with Carolyn when she said, I'm going to France. And she took off with Billy, her son. She let go of a lot of the worldly possessions and really wanted to open to a new possibility. She wrote a book and then started focusing on being a recovering marketer. Now, 2 books and 5 years later, she's been sharing all the things she's learned on her journey towards a higher purpose. Now, that's a purpose that embraces the share economy, conscious capitalism, B corporations, and the founding of her own purpose-driven business school, the Slow School of Business. She's a professional speaker, but most importantly, she's a wholehearted woman who's really got some great perspectives to share. And then Samantha Nolan-Smith. After finishing law school, Samantha did the traditional thing. She accepted a job in the corporate world, in a law firm. But she really quickly discovered that corporate law really wasn't her cup of tea. And what she did was she looked for a better use of her skills and talents and started working with Aboriginal communities in Australia, supporting them to claim back their land and protect their cultural heritage and improve their well-being. But that was really burn-out work, and it took her a while to recover from chronic fatigue. Now as she's moved forward, she's learned how to embody the energy of feminine, something she's always, up until then, been in denial about, apparently, as an ambitious career woman. But these days she teaches other women to build businesses from a place of alignment and connection with the feminine. And so she is very much a woman who wants to change the way that the paradigms operate in our business today. So that's the background, and what I'd love to do now is hand over and speak to Carolyn about her approach to this whole concept of it being our time, a very new and exciting time for conscious women, and then we'll also move to Samantha and get her perspective before we have a three-way open-hearted conversation. After that, we very much want to hear your voices and address your questions as well. We want this conversation to continue after tonight and into the future. The way that you interact with us is if you're on the phone or Skype, you use your keypad. You can simply push *2 and I'll see a little raised hand icon here on the screen, and then I'll be able to unmute you so that you can ask your question or add your perspective. Alternatively, if you're on the webcast, you'll be able to see a Q&A area where you can type in a question, because we'd certainly love to hear your perspective. So that's the background on how this call came about and the women that you're sharing it with today. And now I'd like to hand over and have a chat with Carolyn. Are you there with us,
Hi,
Carolyn?
everybody. Hi, Angela.
Hello, darling. How are you going?
Good. Hi, Samantha.
Hi, Carolyn.
Oh, yes, we've got Samantha here as well, which was fabulous. So let's just start and get some background, or to go further on the opening of this conversation, Carolyn, as to what does "it's our time" mean to you? What's the feeling and the energy behind that statement for you?
I think that over the last particularly 5 years since I've been personally evolving into a new leadership space, getting out of the old marketing paradigm and into a new leadership space around conscious capitalism and B Corps, and been studying the share economy, getting actively involved in communities and organisations that are actually birthing new systems and new ways of being in life and business. I've become increasingly exposed to the fact that there's this whole new paradigm that's being born out of a resistance to traditional patriarchy and capitalism. Capitalism has a serious cancer in it. We know that. Capitalism is good. I'm not saying it's not a system that we shouldn't have, but we have seen capitalism become rather destructive, and we've seen some serious atrocities occur against the environment and against humanity as a result of it. And I think women are feeling this double-edged sword, this pain that's coming from a capitalist system that doesn't serve women, and also a patriarchal system that doesn't serve women. So we've got this three-pronged pitchfork of power, ego and money, which is really what drives both of the traditional capitalist and patriarchal systems. And I think that from my perspective, that what I've observed is there is this new system, this new world being born as a result of the pain of those two systems. And so I'm having a lot more conversations, and I'm feeling it very deeply in every pore and every part of my body that it's our time to lead as women, and to lead us out of the negative and the things that are not serving us, it's not serving our children, and it's not serving humanity or the planet. So I believe it's our time to lead, and to do that in an inclusive way with men, women, children, with everybody. But it requires us to have a new mindset and a new passion and a new direction, and women need to step up to the plate and stop conceding and start leading.
That's a really powerful statement there, to stop conceding and to start leading. Can I just dig into there a little bit about how you feel perhaps we've been encouraged or forced or just moved into conceding because of the way the system has been created?
Well, I think we're conditioned to concede as women from the minute we're born. We take on the ingrained patterns and historical stories that have been passed on to us from our mothers and future generations, etc., etc. So our natural inclination as women is to concede, to acquiesce, to please, to avoid conflict, to keep the home fires burning and keep everybody happy. And when I say everybody, that means our children, our partners, our employers. And so I feel like very often women accept this kind of, we concede and we regress actually, and we allow other people and other circumstances and so on to dictate. And we're very compliant as women. We don't want to stir the pot, so we will avoid conflict at all costs. And our commitment to please others and to make other people happy is stronger than our commitment to lead change and fix what's not working in the world. So that leaves a real angst for a lot of women, amongst a lot of women, I believe. Certainly has in me anyway.
Yeah, and it's something that I can certainly relate to as well. And it was certainly part of that initial conversation that we had, and recognising that is part of our generational programming, I guess is the way that I look at it, you know, in terms of that the approval seeking and as you say, not rocking the boat. And it's certainly something that, you know, I'm learning to expand out of, but it hasn't come naturally. So yeah, so what we're talking about here is that pain that we are feeling, and that different women feel it in different ways. It can just be this feeling of dissatisfaction or disappointment or frustration, or there's a lot of different words that if people listening may identify with as this desire for change that's bubbling up inside. Now, thank you. Now, if I can move across to Samantha for a moment. Samantha, the concept of it's our time and, you know, bringing in our feminine energy to be able to move forward and create this new paradigm, what does it mean to you? How would you like to express it with us?
Thanks, Angela, and can I say thanks for inviting me to be a part of this call. I think it's such an important conversation. For me, the way that I look at it is I see us all today as being daughters of the suffragettes. We're daughters of the second wave of feminism and all the women that fought so hard in the 60s and the 70s and fought for us to get a place where we were respected in the workplace and we were paid equal pay for equal work. That's still a fight that's going on today. And we're also daughters of the consciousness revolution, that where you might time that, certainly when you look at things like the explosion of something like yoga in the world, you look at increasingly the conversations that people are comfortable having about both their inner worlds and about less about religion but more about spirituality. And then you see, you know, the dominance of people like Oprah talking to people like Eckhart Tolle, etc. This has happened at the same time as women have been increasingly fighting for a voice. And what I have found in my own life, and I think it's mirrored in the experience of women around the world, and I think it's mirrored in what I've just spoken about at a global level, is that for myself, I certainly went from, you know, angry 20-year-old feminist who was, really, really mad at the patriarchy, really mad at and felt quite disempowered and wasn't exactly sure how to create change. And so took on a kind of approach to it, which I would now, reflecting back, see as a very masculine approach. I was fighting very, very hard. And, I was going to a lot of a lot of rallies and so forth. And the evolution, my own evolution in that, then kind of really embraced a lot of masculine values and a lot of the patriarchy, because I had almost rejected a lot of my own, what I had seen in my own mother's life, my own mother having been a stay-at-home mother. I had rejected kind of this idea that was interesting. Even I'd watch my dad go out to work and I thought, whatever he's doing looks way more interesting than this domestic situation we've got going on here at home. And so I kind of embraced a lot of those things unconsciously. And as somebody who has always called herself a feminist, I didn't even really take the time to reflect on the fact that I was at the same time embracing a lot of values that were anti the feminine. And so then it really was what you alluded to, the illness that I had that really stopped me, like literally stopped me in my track, where I was laying in bed on and off for 4 years, where I learned a completely different way. And this is why I mentioned this consciousness revolution that happened at the same, simultaneously to a lot of the voicing of the dissatisfaction of women around the world. And that really taught me about something very, very different. That taught me a way to be in the world where I'm not fighting the whole time. It taught me a way to be in the world where I could actually open to the possibility of surrender, and not surrender in a way that was like submission, which is what I would have assumed surrender meant before that, and not surrender as a concession or conceding, as Carolyn spoke about, but surrender to myself, to my deeper truth. And when I did that, I was only then able to uncover what I would call the genuine feminine. And so that journey for me, I think, is the journey that every woman and man is on. Everybody's experiencing that in different ways, and the world is, as a consequence of every individual being a part of that journey, slowly shifting and changing. And the more that this happens, and the more that every individual takes this kind of exploration, whatever it looks like for them, the more that it becomes the time of the disempowered to claim power. And I think that, if in a nutshell, that's what we're really talking about, because all of these responses, the suffragettes, the second wave of feminism, etc., they've all been a response to the disrespect of women, and at a deeper level of the feminine, the energy of the feminine herself. Now, these two things go together. They're separate, but they kind of sit hand in hand in many ways.
Oh, that's a beautiful way of describing it, in particular when you were talking about how you uncovered the genuine feminine. Now, that was really coming to your truth, to your authenticity, which is really one of the key things that we're talking about with this move forward, is letting go of the rules, the frameworks, the structures that tell us the way that things should be done, or the way that we should value things. Carolyn, when you were talking earlier, you talked about those 3 points, the power, the ego, and the money, which tended to be the things that have really dictated the way that businesses develop, the way that we create or accept power in the world. Now, but I know with you in particular, with your conscious marketing approach, when you rejected the way of some of the conversations we've had about, being marketers, because I'm a reformed marketer as well, of, creating desire in people to buy crap that they don't need, and all for the pursuit of the mighty dollar, which we both felt pretty strongly about was happening out there when we'd been changed from people into consumers. And I'd love you to open and up here and be talking about the redefining of purpose and what it actually means to us as we move forward into this new way of being.
Thanks, Ange, and thanks, Samantha, for your comments. I really appreciated your context on this discussion as well. Look, I think I've been studying this idea of higher purpose for the last 5 years, and I believe that a higher purpose is very much from an organisational perspective. It's about having a reason for being which goes beyond profit, and that is about answering the questions of why are we here, and as an organisation, what is the contribution we have to make, and how is the world better because we exist? And also it's that question of how are we being better for the world instead of being best in the world. And I think that a lot of companies have been caught up again in the power, ego, money triad, which is very much around how we can be best in the world. Who determines who's best is beyond me. But the idea of being better for the world actually really resonates. And organisations, I'm finding in my work that the doors are opening without me really having to knock too hard. And I think companies are realising that if they don't have a higher purpose than profit, they're not going to attract the good people. I had a conversation today at a relatively large, fast-growing technology company today, and they're saying they really can't get enough good people, particularly in the IT space, and that the best way they're going to do that is to actually really redirect the company towards a higher purpose. So I think that what companies are realising around this purpose thing is that if they're not actively, consciously, purposefully getting on purpose and actually having a bigger contribution where all stakeholders are looked after, that includes the environment, the community, society and suppliers and every stakeholder, that they're actually not going to have a business because they're actually feeling the pain of the systems that aren't working as well. So purpose from a company perspective, and I think that's the same for individuals. I mean, I see the education system, our kids, they're not being asked at school, they're being asked the question, well, what do you want to be? But they're not really being asked the question of who do you want to be and what inspires you and what are you passionate about, and if you could do anything in the world for your livelihood, which I think is a really powerful word versus career, because career is very kind of power driven. I think livelihood is a very beautiful term that we could start using with kids around how are you going to create a livelihood, how are you going to create a life. And I think so many of us are making a dying at work instead of a living, which is the irony. We talk about the fact that, how do you make a living? Well, actually, I go to work for 60 hours a week. I sit for 2 hours in a car to drive to an office to do a job I hate so I can buy more shit that I don't need. and so we're all feeling that. And I think that we are born to have a higher purpose, but the industrial world beat it out of us and it diverted us away from what was really important to us. So, my passion is to work within two very, very direct industries. One is the tech industry, the fast growth tech industry, because they're the future of the new organisations, the Ubers, the Airbnbs and all of those pseudo share economy platforms. And then the other place is to work in schools, to work with youth, to help them understand there's the self-education, then there's the formal education. And I think students are, if they're directed towards a higher purpose and something they're really passionate about, then they're going to have a mindful self-education, and then they're going to choose subjects from their formal education which are more aligned with their passion and purpose.
I think that's that concept of a livelihood. And whilst you were talking, I did a quick Google, and livelihood is a means of supporting one's existence. And I agree. That's this is a different way of looking at it, a career. And again, look, they're just words, but I find words incredibly powerful. The language that we choose to use and the way that we describe ourselves and the way that we describe what we're doing, it's incredibly powerful. And the idea of finding a way to support my existence rather than just climbing a career ladder, that really resonates with me. And can I ask, Samantha, the concept of moving into purpose? One of the things that we were discussing is the idea of how knowledge of the feminine and the masculine energies and how they can work in harmony. Could you talk to or give me a perspective on how you think that they play out when it comes to pursuing and embodying your purpose?
Yes, absolutely. I think that the pain that you have both spoken to, the pain that women are feeling, but also that men are feeling, absolutely, is the pain of disconnection. And it's disconnection that is on multiple levels. It's disconnection from the land, and this shift that we took in the industrial era through the Industrial Revolution and then into the present day removed us from the land. We see that in the Western world. We see the pain of disconnection that happened to Indigenous peoples around the world when they were moved off their land. But the move off the land is one version of disconnection. The other disconnection that was happening simultaneously, of course, is the disconnection from the soul, is the disconnection from emotion, is the disconnection from intuition. And all of these things really started to be deeply suppressed at the time where logic and rationality started to be revered as the gods of the planet. And so what happened was the masculine, what may have been a very healthy masculine energy up until that point, became a very perverted and dangerous energy that then was embodied as this, as I say, this revering of purely the mind and the ego. And what happened to the feminine in that time was a complete suppression and silencing and disrespecting, and then all of the things that the feminine represented just disappeared, almost fell off the planet. And still we see this to this day in simple things like when I work for myself now, so I have a very different kind of environment. I'll talk about that in a moment. But when I worked in corporate law firms and even when I worked for government and so forth, if you showed emotion in those environments, one, it was considered to be weak. Two, it was considered to be inappropriate. There was no appreciation that emotion might actually be some kind of guidance for us about what's working and what's not working. And the minute that you shut down to your emotion, you shut down to things like ability to understand higher purpose, because you're not listening to your own guidance system. You're not listening to higher influence, higher messaging. The minute that you shut down to intuition and you don't allow for the kinds of conversations where in the workplace, if I had said as an employee, it just feels right, I've just got this instinct about it, or I've just got this feeling about it, but I couldn't back it up with data, or I couldn't back it up with evidence of some sort, people would just dismiss it out of hand, summarily. And so these are the things these are the modern day, the contemporary consequences of what I have spoken about, this suppression of the feminine. So as we shift this and we move into purpose, each of us has an inner job to do around, first of all, clearing out all of those stories that we have all inherited about what is valuable and what is not, and how we should run our businesses and how we should approach getting something done in the world. And the message that we've received to date is you get something done by pushing really hard, by setting clear bounds, by setting clear deadlines and just making it happen and railroading your way through anything or anyone that's in the way of getting that done, and then you'll be certain to, achieve your goals and so forth. And this is this notion of hustle and push and so forth. And all of that is a first layer of story that needs to be cleared out. There's a whole nother layer of story though that I think is so important to mention, and that's the internalized disrespect that we, particularly as women, have taken on about the feminine. Now, this is something that I don't hear many people talking about because it's an uncomfortable conversation. It's the same conversation that any disadvantaged community needs to have, which is the internalized hatred of themselves because they have been pitched against the dominant power structure and individuals within that, and they have been seen to come out as second best. And so what happens is that we ourselves as women have taken on denial of the body or judgment of the body as one example. And so we see horrible examples of that in the world today, where we see girls who have anorexia and bulimia, and every woman basically has a story about her body being too big, too small, too fat, not attractive enough, blah, blah, blah. We see women pushing themselves to the extreme, and I'm an example of this, where they get so exhausted that there's an epidemic of people who have some level of adrenal fatigue. All of this is hatred of the body. The body is the embodiment of the feminine. So there's both the clearing of the masculine stories that are false. There's the clearing of the disrespect of the feminine that has occurred as a consequence. And after all of that is cleared out, then the healthy feminine, the healthy masculine can come together, can marry together to express a full and complete human being. But we're not there yet. We don't see, that's not the current state of humanity. That's the state we will move into in this century, I've no doubt of it. But there's a journey that we're all on to get to that point.
And it's that concept of being an evolution rather than a revolution. And it's that key of self-awareness, of hearing these conversations and joining these conversations that give you a new way of looking at things, a new perspective, that new definition or ways to describe what it is that you've been experiencing, that aha moment of, so that's it. I mean, even just touching, as you were there, on the concept of the hatred of the body, it's epidemic. Absolutely epidemic, that one. And I'd never looked at it from the perspective as, the body is the embodiment of the feminine. And just to move into what you were saying and connect it back to something that Carolyn and I have spoken about, and I'd like to bring up now, is that of what it is that's valued. You were talking about the hustle, the notion of hustle and push as being what's valued in business, for example. And I know we have a lot of entrepreneurial women who are listening to this call and participating in this call. Carolyn, the idea of us not, or whether it be society or whether it be ourselves, not valuing impact and creativity and being of service, putting so much of that emphasis coming back to that trilogy of the power and the money. How does that play out, do you think, for people who are moving into wanting to be of service, wanting to step into an entrepreneurial enterprise, because they have that pull and that desire to be on purpose, but then they have that dichotomy of, well, what, shouldn't I be making more money or shouldn't I be having a bigger impact? And there's, I think, that concept of we're swapping almost one system of this is the way it has to be done for another system, and the entrepreneurial system sometimes feels like a straitjacket itself with that, the six-figure businesses and all of that stuff that's thrown at us. How do you see that playing out?
Yeah, well, actually, it ties into something I was going to say around livelihood, the word that we talked about before. And actually, right livelihood is the fifth path out of the Noble Eightfold Path of Buddhism, that we choose right livelihood. And I think it plays into exactly what you're talking about, Ange, is that many of us are corporate escapees, and we escape the corporate and we go into entrepreneurship, and we end up just creating a smaller version of the old system that we embedded, and that new system or that new direction we might take is still driven by it's driven by competition. It's driven by being separate. It individualizes us, and a lot of the courses and programs that I see on the market in the entrepreneurial space are actually just microcosms of a system that's been created at a macro level. So the ideas of power, money, ego, and competition are just reinforced, but at a smaller level. So I really believe that if you find your purpose, and if you know what it is that you want to do, you know why you want to do it, which is really important, that we need to be a little bit open to the how and how that actually unfolds, and that's where synchronicity comes to play. But what we're being taught, though, is we're taught funnel marketing, where you have to go through 16 steps to coerce people into buying from you, you know, the digital marketing space. We are often we're not open to how what it is we want to create will get created or how it will unfold. So we're actually trying to apply masculine power, control dynamics to something that perhaps needs to just unfold. And maybe that new idea or that new business, just like what we're doing now, we have no idea whether we're going to monetize what we're doing, which is the great word. How do we productize, monetize, whatever? And I'm not saying that we don't want to do that, but maybe we just get called to create something, and the gift is in the creation, and the gift is in the giving of that, and the gift is in being of service, and the gift is inspiring other people to take action, and the gift is it comes in a million other ways that.
Oh, I think we may have lost Carolyn there for a moment. Samantha, are you still with us? Oh. We seem to have lost both of our guests at the moment. Hopefully they'll dial back in shortly. That's the intricacies and the fickleness of the online world when you're dialing into things like this. So hopefully they'll be back with us soon. But whilst we're waiting for them, I'm going to just expand a little on those subjects that Carolyn and Samantha were talking about, because this is a really important point that we discussed actually before this call, and it's that, as we were touching on there, it's the concept of not switching one system for another. If the reason that, working in a corporate space is not what you want to pursue at the moment because of the restrictions, because of the flexibility that you want in your own work, then don't create a business that puts those same constrictions on. Hello, Samantha. I saw the two of you dropped out, so which happens sometimes. So I'm assuming that Carolyn will dial back in shortly as well.
Hello, I think you lost me.
We did. We lost you both, but you're both back now. So I was just.
All right.
I was just touching on that need not to create a system that constricts you in the same way that the original one was. So, handing back over to you again.
So I think what I was just saying was that, because we have a child, and we don't expect them to be born and go out to work and start making money. And I think that when we are working on purpose, we don't have to attach a monetary outcome to every time we're doing that. So I feel like we can create, to give, to serve, to actually make a difference in the world But the minute we start to attach, and I certainly found this with Flow School, the minute I started to desperately want it to be making money because I was spending all my time on it. And yes, there is the financial imperative. We've got bills to pay, etc. But when I started to apply negative masculine principles to really wanting to control and make it work, was it kind of pushed back against me and said, well, you know what, it's not going to happen. And so it's that surrender thing that Samantha was talking about, is I've surrendered that I want to continue to create and build Flow School, but I'm not going to force it to have to be something that perhaps it isn't meant to be. So I think if we create to give, to serve, and to see what happens and to let things unfold, then we have a much more peaceful experience in building our businesses if we take that approach.
I think that's a really important point for everyone to hear and to listen. And Samantha, I'll pop across to you in a moment, but just making a comment on it, highlighting that point that you've made, Carolyn, that there is a financial imperative. And we're not saying for a moment that, you know, money is bad, making profit is bad. The philosophy that I like to approach this with is that profit is the result of right action. And so if you're on purpose, if you have the desire to serve, to make a difference, to help another person, which ultimately is what a business is about, you know, depending on who it is that you're wanting to work with, you know, putting the right pieces in place and being in that flow, profit will happen as a result if you've got the right structures, you know, for you in place. But it's also touching on the concept of redefining success. And this is really at the crux of what we're talking about, is that what do you consider your business to be a success? What's important to you? You know, one of the things is that prosperity is not just measured in dollars. You know, one of the pieces that is most important to me with the business that I'm running is I have a 13-year-old daughter and a 17-year-old son, and I very much want to model for them, you know, the self-leadership concept of it is possible for you to have joy in what it is that you do. It is possible for you to, you know, start and finish a day feeling really good about the contribution that you've made. It is possible for you to get an understanding of what it is that you feel so drawn to, and you can create a livelihood. So I'm going to use that word from now on, Carolyn, a livelihood around that. And so my definition of success, when back in the days when I had my marketing agency, was very much around numbers of clients and dollars in the bank. You know, that's what I was driven by. But I just couldn't sustain that. I guess if I looked at it, Samantha, I was probably in adrenal fatigue back then as well, and realised that things had to change, and I needed a new definition of success that fit the woman that I had, you know, grown into in my late 40s. So if we come across, Samantha, if I may, and ask, hello, darling. We can hear you again, absolutely. What I wanted to ask of you is the concept of being in flow and in alignment, as opposed to always in that masculine hustle energy. How do we fold into that? Carolyn, you're still there? Yes. This is definitely a buggy call tonight, ladies. Thank you for persevering with us, because it seems that we've lost our two guests again. So I'm not sure what's happening there. So I am quite happy to continue to have this conversation until I get my lovely ladies back on the line. It certainly looks as though they are, but I can't actually see them. So that's one of the challenges that I'd set to you. Okay, apparently no one can hear me. Just going to do a refresh of the page and see what's happening.
Hello?
Hello, Samantha, can you hear me?
I have been falling in and out of the call for the last 5 or 10 minutes. I apologise for that.
That's okay. I'm just going to do a quick
question for me, Angela.
I did, but I just want to do a quick test. We have a Candice on the line. Candice, I'm just going to unmute you for a moment because I'd love to know that you can actually hear us because we've been having some buggy problems on the line, as you've heard. So just unmuting you now. Attempting to. No, it's not going to allow me to. Well, there you go. Sometimes it just misbehaves. So let's try again. Samantha, are you still with us?
I am.
Great. So the question that I was getting across to you was, as Carolyn had been touching on and then I'd been focusing on there, is that, the new definition of the way that you can work and, that redefining success as to what's important to you. But a part of that is being able to work in alignment and in flow, as opposed to being in that hustling sort of always go, go, go space. I do not deny for a moment that there are times when we do need to hustle in our business, when we do need to call on the masculine, aspects of our character. But for someone who doesn't want to have that stress and that strain, 24/7 in their business, what can you talk to us or how we can approach from more of that feminine side?
Well, as you know, this is my great passion in life, is exploring the possibility of running your entire business from a place of ease and allowing and receptivity, and more importantly than that, this concept of enoughness. We live in a world that is absolutely focused on never being enough. Nothing is ever enough. And this, again, if you want to track it back, comes from a business structure was set up through the Industrial Revolution, where anything that was produced wasn't enough. So there was this constant focus on productivity and more, and that's not enough, and that's not enough. Okay, how can we refine it? How can we get it better and better and better? And how can we produce more with the least amount of input, but get more output? And the messages that we got from that are, I can never output enough, that I never can do enough to satisfy whomever the authority figure is. And in this case, I can never do enough to satisfy the world. And this has been internalized. And so we all have this sense of anxiety around, if I've got these numbers, that's not enough. And if I'm earning this amount of money, that's not enough. And if I am, if I'm producing this number of products, the quality isn't good enough, or whatever it is, whatever iteration it is for you. And the necessity for each person who is interested in moving into a different way of doing business is the necessity to, first of all, allow all of that to drop, but also to stop needing to be in control, to stop needing to absolutely think that every single aspect of their business and their life needs to be micromanaged. And when you do that, when you are willing to just stop and allow somebody other than yourself and allow energies other than your own, which for most people is a predominantly unhealthy masculine energy, to influence the way that you operate on a daily basis, including in the way that you approach business, then you start to uncover kind of miraculous things like, oh, I didn't actually need to work so hard. Oh, opportunities come to me when I am open and allowing of those opportunities. I don't have to push every opportunity. I don't have to make every opportunity happen. I can actually trust that things can come to me. And so this is the core work, if you like. It's because at the base of my business isn't enough, really what is at the core of that is I'm not enough. And that's the deep pain that every human is facing, that somehow I'm unworthy, I'm not enough. And when we can face that, then, and realize the untruth of that, realize the lie of that, then we can start to build a business and a life from a place of fullness. And the fullness then is where the feminine can come in, because the feminine she doesn't get, there's no space for her in this anxious push, force it all to happen, control every minute of every day and control everybody else's behavior and actions, etc., etc. She's just got no space in there. So it's not until you fall into a place of trust that then you can even see her and then start to uncover, well, what would that look like in my business if I wasn't hustling every minute of every day? What would it look like if instead of forcing and pushing myself on my community and pushing myself onto other people and so forth, I just focused on connecting with them. I focused on relationship building. I focused on allowing for opportunities that I can't even imagine yet to come to me. This is a very, very different way of working. I explore and experiment with this every single day. I experiment with it with my own community, and I know that we've got a journey yet because the mind keeps jumping in and saying, hang on, but you can't just let it be too easy. You've got to make it hard on some level because this is what we've been taught.
That's such a new perspective. That is the essence of, again, of what it is that we're talking about. Now, you may be listening to the call and listening to what Samantha is sharing with us and think, but well, it can't really work that way because we've got this belief that's running through us that it needs to be hard. It's going to be hard. We need to, if you look at the beliefs, just for an example that I grew up with those generational beliefs that we've inherited. My dad's a shearer and a fencer on a New Zealand farm by trade. Thou shalt work hard. That is the only way that you can actually create the prosperity that you want. And so that's the paradigm that I certainly was birthed into and grew up around. And so we often have misbelief or distrust that it can actually be that you can create a business and work and flow. So what we're talking about here is replacing trust by putting that into the place instead, and believing that it can actually be easy. It can actually be easy.
And I think that's really important what you say there, Angela, that, well, we've all grown up in some iteration of what you've just spoken about with your own father. And so the mind goes, but hang on, it hasn't been easy. Like it's referring back to the past and it's saying, well, I've got evidence to show you that that's bullshit, that whole flow idea you've got going there. And of course it does, because it's been operating in a structure that it set up itself without even realizing it was doing it, by inheriting stories from parents and grandparents and further back ancestors, where the story was life is hard and the only way to make money is to work extremely hard and very long hours, and then maybe some of us will make it. And so whilst we continue with that story, that's what we create. We create more of that. And this is part of the empowerment thing that I think is most interesting, is the recognition amongst all human beings that we co-create our experience, that we are not victims of just a world that's in chaos and that we can't do anything about that, that actually we have a huge amount of capacity to control our environment, to control our response, and ultimately to shift the experience that both we have, but particularly what the next generation has and the next generation has.
Absolutely. And that concept of co-creation, with a friendly universe, if I can bring that around, Carolyn, this is a conversation that we've had in the past, which is a point that I believe should be made tonight as well. The concept of collaboration and co-creation, not necessarily, though it does involve it with the universe, but with other people as well. Letting go of that concept of pure competition in the market as being one of the pieces of the paradigm that we've inherited and the one that we're choosing to change. Can you give me some perspectives on your concept of co-creation, because it's certainly something that I've heard you speak of in the past.
I'm a bit of a fan of the co-words. I mean, the 5 values for my business and for myself are courage, consciousness, compassion, connection, and co-creation. And they're actually my personal principles and values, and they're the ones that I actually infuse into the business. And sometimes I forget they're sort of like the homing pigeons, I guess. And for me, the idea of co-creation, that can only really happen with a group of like-minded, conscious individuals. It can only happen when that group are courageous enough to step outside of conformity. So the opposite of courage is not cowardice, it's actually conformity. And so courage, we've got to have compassion, consciousness, and a deep human connection. So they're the kind of 4 co-words. From those, the space of those 4, then we can start to co-create. And for me, co-creation is where a group of like-minded individuals come together to create something that's bigger than any of those individuals could create on their own. And so this is sort of what I believe is the basis of the new system that's going to either replace capitalism or reinvent capitalism, is that we're seeing the emergence of cooperatives. I mean, co-ops have always been around. In fact, co-ops existed actually before our capitalist system that we currently know actually evolved. But we're actually seeing a resurgence of cooperatives across America. I was at an event last week in Melbourne where there were 2 people from the US talking about cooperatives. We're also, interestingly, with co-creation, if I wanted to use an example, we're seeing Uber as an example is what I call a pseudo share economy organization, because what we're seeing is we're still seeing a technology solution overlaid over a old patriarchal capitalist system, because what we're seeing is that we're not seeing prosperity for everyone. We're not seeing equitable share of wealth, and I don't mean equal share of wealth because that's kind of communist kind of smackings, but what we're not seeing is equitable share in wealth. So we're still seeing these pseudo share economy platforms where the few are the ones that are financially winning, but the majority are not. So for me, co-creation has to really, it's about developing a cooperative platform where everybody is actually prosperous as a result of that entity or enterprise being created. So this is the double-edged sword of technology. It's great because technology has the power to develop really well-run technology-driven cooperative platforms, which is what co-creation is really all about. But we're seeing technology not being used for its true potential for co-creation. So that's kind of, for me, is what co-creation is when a group of people come together to create something bigger than what can be done on their own, and where everybody shares equitably in the prosperity and the financial rewards that come out of that enterprise.
And it's a very full-bodied description when you put it that way, and it comes back to the concepts earlier that we were touching on of conscious marketing, where it cannot just be profits. It also has to be the people and the suppliers and the community, and there's all people that are in that circle that needs to benefit from a business, and from an individual sense, because again, many of us that are listening on this call are individuals who feel that pull towards creating something for themselves. both your perspective of co-creation, of working with others to create something bigger than you can alone, and Samantha, your perspective on co-creating, with the feminine, with the universe, with the concepts of stepping away from scarcity and into abundance. They both merge and blend together beautifully because they're attached to your heart, is the way that I see this. Is that, and it's breaking out of that old paradigm, as you so beautifully said at the beginning, Carolyn, with the power and the ego and the money as being the only measures of success. Really, what we're talking about here is that you as an individual can have a profound impact on another individual, on a small group, on a community, on a country. I mean, it can be at all different levels, but we get to choose. And we get to choose, and we get to choose the way that we want to show up in the world. That's really the message that we want to get across, isn't it? Self-determination.
Yeah. And can I just say something? You said that word choose. We get to choose. So my business coach picked me up a couple of weeks ago, and she said, what's the difference between deciding and choosing? And the word decide is so definite and so strong, and it originates from words like homicide, suicide, those sorts of words, where decide is just so, it's actually a very definitive dead-end terminology to use. But the word choose, I choose something. For now, I choose this. Next week, I choose something else. And so there's a gentleness and a flow and an openness to that word choose. When we use the word decide, we're killing things off. And that is a very negative, masculine, patriarchal kind of connotation. So personally, at my, and I think certainly what I've learned is that I need to be gentler with my language and gentler with how that language plays out in the things that I choose moving forward. So I think language, as I've already said, is just so important. It's the language we use for ourselves, but the language we also use with our kids, the language we use with our peers and families and in our community. And sometimes we can use language which really is not helpful. And so, when you said the word choose, I had to just share that little anecdote about the difference between choosing and deciding.
I love that. Love that contrast.
Yeah. I love it. I love that you say I have to be gentler with my language, because language creates. And so it brings it full circle back to the point that you're making, Angela, about co-creation, that the more that we use language consciously, the more we also consciously create. It's a beautiful thing. I love that reminder, Carolyn.
It makes me feel, listening and obviously participating in this conversation, what I've just written down that came to me was our need or our choice to soften the edges of our goals. And because what you said just before, Carolyn, that, for now I choose this, next week I may choose something else. And that flows into the points that you've been making, Samantha, about being in flow, not being anchored is not necessarily a bad thing, but not being stuck. This is the way it must be done. Listening to your intuition and leaning into and connecting to that feminine flow that we have of following our heart. Now, and I'm not talking about just being all airy-fairy and, I'll just do whatever I feel like in my business and never have any structure. I say we definitely need to have structure and intention and a vision and things that we're aiming for, but that we don't have to be in a straitjacket. By softening the edges of our goals, we can follow more into that feeling of service and co-creation. I think really the heart of this is permission. It's the heart of it is giving ourselves permission to create in the way that feels good, because when you're creating in a way that feels good, then that's when you do your best work.
And that's where the masculine and feminine
too.
And it's where the masculine and feminine work well together. No, the synchronicity absolutely is
true. And it's why that, exactly as you've said, Angela, where you have systems in place that support then the creativity, the intuition and so forth to play, that's where you find synchronicity, that's where you find flow, but you don't lose it. You don't lose it to airiness and kind of no direction and no focus and so forth. And that's the way the masculine and the feminine are supposed to dance together. That's the intention.
And that is the concept, guys, of the new paradigm that you get to design, that you get to structure, that you choose to structure and to design and to flow into. So we're not suggesting that, you know, the whole world's broken and we need to fix it, but we are suggesting that take the time to recognize that the way things are working or not working is how you respond to that, how that feels. You get to choose of how you want to create the way that you're going to step into the future. And most importantly, there's plenty of other women to cooperate with, to collaborate with, to co-create with, and men, not putting them out of the picture. I'm married, I have a son, I love them all. But that co-creation with that balance of the feminine and the masculine energies is the future. It cannot continue to be just in that masculine space because it doesn't feel right for us. It constrains us and contains us, and that's not the way we want to be. But oh, my goodness, I could talk about this for years, and I dare say there'll be more calls of this respect. But what I'd love to do, just for a moment, if you feel called to add your voice to this conversation, this is an invitation, not a demand, then there's two ways that you can do that. If you're on the webcast, you're able to type in a question into the Q&A, a question or an observation that I can read out or address to one of our speakers. And if you're dialed in through Skype or through your phone, you can simply hit *2, and I'll see a little hand raised on the screen in front of me so that I can unmute you to speak. So I will keep an eye on those two areas as we're continuing. We've probably got another 10 minutes or so on the call. So I'll keep an eye on those two places if you want to ask a question or to add your thought. As I move over again to Carolyn, and so as we're moving to the end of this particular conversation, Carolyn, what do you feel is the message that the takeaway that you want someone to be leaving this call with to move forward into their time?
Yeah. Thanks, Angela, for asking that question. I think often we can have very macro level discussions and get off a call like this and feel inspired or frustrated, one or the other. And we can be thinking, well, what do I do now? You know, how do I integrate what we've been talking about? And I always think that we need to, you know, I use journaling as one of the tools that I use to help me come to decisions. Help me choose things. I nearly said the decision, but the right word. So I use my journal to help me choose direction and come up with some answers to things. And so one of the things that I would encourage people to do is to find their tool that allows them to explore more deeply the concepts that we've talked about. And the overall message, you know, I use the word inspiration. It's a personal word that I've made up, which means inspired action. And for me, I think inspiration without action is nothing. It's pointless. And then action without inspiration, that's not inspired, could actually at worst be dangerous and destructive. So we need to have inspired action and have some inspiration. And I think it means just doing something simple, like if we're wanting to step up and lead, having conversations with our friends about this, or our child, or our partner for that matter. It could mean just doing some small acts of leadership within our home, using a keep cup instead of a disposable cup. I've been using one of those for 3 years. I'm actually a pain in the ass about it. I tell everybody they should be using a keep cup. To me, it's small acts of small acts on an everyday basis that are helping you step into a higher level of consciousness, and many small acts make up a collective big act, I guess. So I think it's be curious, start to find the tool that's going to help you kind of evolve in this space, understand what inspiration is, and just do one thing. Do one thing tomorrow, do one thing the next day, do one thing the next, and just keep moving forward.
That's a great way of looking at it, and that idea of finding the tool that appeals to you. I know journaling is certainly one that I use every single morning, and I must say you're the one who put me onto that with the Artist Way. That's where it started from quite a few years ago with the journaling. And a question actually came up whilst you were talking from one of the people who are on the line, who's talking about how she's been recovering from adrenal fatigue herself. Hello, Fiona. And getting back into her business and working with some of the great things that we've shared tonight. She's been experiencing a shift, which is great, but what she's looking for is how to connect with like-minded women, a group of like-minded women, because there's a lot of us feel that these sort of conversations that connect and resonate, but they won't connect and resonate with everyone. And I absolutely agree that you need to be, as much as you can, in a community of whether it be a community of 200, 300, but people that have the same perspective. So to that end, I have a Facebook group. I know, Samantha, you do as well. Carolyn, you have a community that's through Slow School. So we will definitely, when this recording goes out, I'll also make sure that there is contact details within that email of these different community options that you've got. Everyone who's registered for this call is now, by default, a part of our community, but we like the three of us, but we can extend specific invitations, Fiona, where you'll be able to find absolutely your tribe around you who really resonate with you, so that you don't feel alone and you can be a co-creator as you're moving forward. So I'll make sure everyone receives that information. Yeah.
Angela, can I just add one more suggestion? And that is one of the things that I find very helpful is I believe in I believe self-education. Jim Rohn said formal education will make you a living or a dying, as I've referred to before, but a self-education will make you a fortune. And I like to think about fortune as in not just financial wealth, but prosperity terms. And so for me, I believe that as business people, at big danger as entrepreneurs as we get funneled into attending business programs that are teaching you their way, not your way. And that's a really dangerous place to be in. And so I always advocate for women to go out and find and try lots of different events and things, but things that are really of interest to you. So go to an event where there is a topic or there is a subject or there is something that's pushing you outside of your confined or your perhaps your old paradigm of learning, etc. So for me, it's find the communities like the ones that we're building, but actively go and pursue your interests. Have a weekly date and with yourself to attend something that is really outside of your perhaps normal events and activities. It's a creative date with yourself, I guess, or something like that. So, because that's where I think you find your community, is when you actually start to play outside the edges of your usual social and business, learning and activities.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And again, that's so much what we talked about tonight with the tuning into your intuition. What makes you curious? What have you seen, or what do you read, or what do you hear? And you prick up your ears and go, I'm interested. Follow that, and see what comes as a result. I'm a complete addict to self-education, that's for sure. Thank you, Carolyn. And Samantha, may I pop across to you with what the impressions, the feelings, the inspired actions, the infractions, I think it was, that you would like to leave our listeners with on this particular occasion?
Well, I think that, Fiona's experience of having adrenal fatigue reminded me of something, which is that one of the core elements of bringing through the feminine is to operate your business from a place of joy and delight. And what I discovered, that part of my fatigue journey was around suppressing that joy and that delight on a daily basis because I was being so serious and so professional and, all of these things. And when I started to alleviate myself of the heaviness of that and welcome in more joy and delight and more flow, my fatigue really got better very, very quickly at that point. And so I think that that's really important, and everything that Carolyn said about then finding self-education and then finding events and having a date with yourself and so forth really can absolutely tap into that. So I think that that's a really, really important thing to leave people with. I think the other thing that's hugely important is the permission. You've talked about permission, Angela, the permission to stop. This I haven't touched on so much in this call, but I'm absolutely passionate about talking about on a regular basis about that it's okay to stop. And there's lots of ways that we can stop, but one that I really like to share with people is to stop within the middle of the working day and to just reconnect with yourself, to give yourself time to check in. How am I actually feeling in my body? Am I feeling enlivened? Am I feeling vibrant? Am I feeling like whatever I'm working on is somehow filling me up? Or is it draining me in some way? Or am I really exhausted because my kid kept me up last night and I really just need to be in bed right now? And then honoring that, stopping so that you can listen to your intuition, or you can check in with your emotions. Maybe you had a difficult conversation with somebody, or you got an email that wasn't as nice as you thought it was going to be, or some kind of social media interaction that was horrible. Rather than just pushing through that, which is the old model, stopping, using whatever tools you have to hand to help you to clear that on the spot. I literally do this every single day of my working life. I notice what's going on in my body. If I've got some kind of anxiety, some level of stress at all, I use the tools that I have at my disposal to clear those things, and then I move on with my day. And the reason that I do it in that order is because if I don't clear, let's say it's anxiety or anger or frustration or whatever, then I carry that into the next task, and then that task gets infused with the frustration, and then guess what happens? I create drama. Somehow there's a delay with the project that I'm working on, or there's a miscommunication and blah, 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 blah. So sometimes the stopping is literally 10 minutes. Sometimes it's longer. It might be an hour, or you might need to actually just go to sleep for 20 minutes and so forth. I often talk to people about yoga nidra as a very deep form of laying down meditation, where you can do it for 10 minutes, you can do it for 20 minutes, where you get very, very relaxed and very clear in your mind, and then stepping back into your work day. But the idea of taking the time, integrating those practices into your work day, in and of itself revolutionizes the way that you approach your business, because you are not operating either half full or from a place of exhaustion or from a place of emotional distress of any kind. You're operating from a place of alignment, and then issues like higher purpose naturally come through. The decision to not to focus on profit over people doesn't ever occur. Once you're in alignment, these questions kind of naturally drop away because you're operating from your highest and best self. So they're the two things I would leave: joy and delight, and be willing to stop.
Those are very, very juicy insights for us to take away. And I mean, they do align beautifully with the concept of embracing the feminine, of not pushing through the pain, of checking in with yourself. And I love that perspective that when we do that, then there's a much higher chance that true purpose will come through, because she needs space. She needs space to find us. She needs space to express herself. And if we're always pushing, pretty hard to find that space.
Exactly.
So this call, I feel incredibly relaxed. I think it's when we start talking about these sort of subjects and we open up to a new way of being that, me personally, I just get this feeling of possibility. And that's the part that excites me. And that does, Carolyn, make me want to take inspired action. And from my perspective, where do we go from here? It's a case of not allowing the conversation to finish here, not to have this as a punctuation mark, but to have this as, the beginning of a new story. That's what I encourage anyone who has the opportunity to either be here tonight or to listen to the call when we share it with our larger communities. It's to tap into that feeling that you have, that desire for change, and to begin to have these conversations with other people as well. Because it's a wave that's going to come through. We're not alone. The very fact that the three of us found each other and wanted to have this conversation, the very fact that we had, I think at last look, over 70 people actually registering for this conversation, even in the small ripples that we put out in the world to begin with. It's a conversation that needs to continue. It needs to be curated. It needs to be encouraged because there needs to be a new way of doing things. We all know that. We all feel that. And so it's looking for those feelings. It's following them. It's letting go of the concept that I must do things this way or it should be done that way. It's that permission to choose to design a new way of showing up in the world. And that is that whole perspective that we started with, that concept of self-leadership, that concept of creating a new paradigm and defining success how you want it to be, defining what prosperity is to you, what is profitable for you. It's not always counted in money. Financial imperatives aside, there's so much more that's possible and out there for us. And it's exciting. To me, this is exciting. I'm excited for my children. I'm excited for us. I'm excited for the possibilities that we can step into. So, my darling ladies, Carolyn and Samantha, thank you so much for spending your time on this call this evening. And thank you to all of our listeners. And I would just ask you to share the word, to share the story, to share the call. And I have a feeling that we might even do more of these in the future. So thank you guys very, very much.
Okay.
Thank you,
right.
Angela.
Thank you, and thank you,
Carolyn.
Angela. Thank you, Samantha. What a privilege to be here. Bye.
I completely agree.
Absolutely. And for all of our listeners, this call is going out, and then there will be the connection to those opportunities for joining communities where you can continue these conversations with like-minded women. So step up, it's your time, it's our time. Let's all lead into a whole new way of being. Thanks very much, guys, and we'll be talking to you all again very soon.